Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. This interview is being conducted and recorded in the United States and the United Kingdom. And today we have a very special guest, the extraordinary author and editor, James Silvester. How's it going, James?
It's going very, very, very well indeed. Thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. It is nice to see you. I have seen your name on my computer screen about 500 times now, and it's a pleasure to actually meet you in person. And thank you for setting the time aside for me to interview you.
Oh, it's an honor to be asked. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, where are you located in England? Birmingham?
Manchester.
Oh, Manchester.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
God's own city, as they say.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, just outside of San Francisco.
I know.
So
I'm really pleased. Yeah, I spent a lot of time. You're closest to Sacramento, a little town. I think I emailed you about a town called Meadow Vista.
yeah.
It was about,
Yes.
if I remember, 40 minutes or so drive from Sacramento, and spent some time in the Bay Area. So, happy memories.
Yeah, Meadow Vista. We've been there. In fact, we took my wife's family when they were visiting from Japan. We stopped through Meadow Vista on the way to Lake Tahoe. And
yes,
yeah,
Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, that whole area is absolutely gorgeous. It's about an hour and 45-minute drive from here. And you're correct. It's about 30 or 40 minutes northeast of Sacramento. And yeah, really beautiful area. So how many times have you been to the States?
I've only been twice. I spent a good few weeks there. That first time in California, and then I went again a few years later and spent some time in New York, which, great city, but it wasn't, shall we say, where my heart wasn't as much there as it was in your neck of the woods. So
right.
yeah.
Oh yeah, very completely different. New York and California are like two different countries almost.
Yes.
And then Texas is another one on its own. So what's the weather like? It was cold here this morning, which is rare.
Yeah, it's gone cold now. We were only complaining a couple of days ago that for the end of November it's really, really warm, and then today changed all that. It's got quite cold. So
okay, yeah, I went outside and saw some ice this morning. In California, winter is now about 10 or 12 weeks long, and then the rest of the year it's summer. So we have this little tantalizing reminder of what it used to be like before climate change. It's normally hot here. So James has just provided quite the monumental contribution to Doctor Who literary history with the release of the Temporal Logbook 3, Changed Lives, which is published by Pencil Tip. And James, you penned 2 stories in this anthology. There's a total of 14 stories, and yours are titled A Night in Santa's Workshop and Sepultured Soul. Did I get that right?
Why not? What does pronunciation mean anyway? There, go for it.
and you edited and you compiled this whole thing. So are you excited about it?
I'm very excited about it. And I should say that the first of those stories, I asked Richard Peevers wrote virtually all of it, and I asked him not to include my name because it's his story. But he very kindly insisted on co-author credit, just because he got a huge chunk of the way. Sorry, you've got police sirens going past. A huge chunk of the way through his tale, and it's fan stuff. No one's being paid for it. Life gets in the way. He just couldn't commit to finishing it. So I finished the story off for him. And I said, look, this is your story, Richard, but he insisted on putting my name down. So thanks to him for that. And the second one, I wasn't intending to write a story at all for the collection. I always thought it's kind of, I don't know, ungentlemanly to commission oneself. I could put it in those terms. And we had a writer lined up to do a 7th Doctor story for us. And it's a oldest story in the world, really. They just got hit with writer's block, and they got in touch with me when we're getting closer to the deadline. And I started, putting my editor's hat on and saying, "Can I see some copy, please?" And he said, "Look, I'm really sorry. I can't make it work. I can't make the story work. So I need to pull out." So he dropped out quite late on, and I tried to get a replacement writer commissioned. But by that time, it was really hard to find anybody. So I bit the bullet and wrote what hopefully is a readable stand-in myself.
Okay, very interesting. I've heard of the writer's block thing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to ask you about that here in a little bit. We're gonna touch on that again. I have a digital review copy here, thanks to you. I appreciate that. And I am waiting for my bound copy to arrive in the mail. I ordered it from Lulu, so it's either being shipped from UK or Canada. I'm not sure yet, and I cannot wait until it gets here because I want to read some of those stories to my kids. And with the this copy here, I see that these stories range all the way up to the 13th Doctor. There's a total of 14 stories, and I took particular note of the fact that the foreword here is written by none other than Yi So, the talented Canadian actor that performed Chang Li in the 1996 TV movie with Paul McGann, The Enemy Within. I think that the title of that was The Enemy Within.
Yeah.
So did Yi volunteer for this, or did somebody reach out to him and ask him?
Well, Yiji's been absolutely brilliant, and you couldn't ask to meet a lovelier person. Basically, that came about. I wanted to have a foreword from somebody connected to the show, and I was racking my brains who would be good to approach. And the 8th Doctor story that we have, without wanting to give too many spoilers away,
Right.
Chang Li has a cameo in the 8th Doctor story that we have. So I thought, well, we were going to revisit Chang Li, and we can probably get away with it without bludgeoning over all those rights issues with an unofficial publication. I said, well, I'll approach Yi and see if he's got time, if he's willing to do it. Because at that time, we could be anybody. I just dropped him an email to his website and said, look, this is who I am. This is who Pencil Tip Arm. This is the project we're doing and why we're doing it. It would be great if you were willing to do something. But completely understand you'll probably have a million of these requests, and it's absolutely fine if it's a no. And he got back in touch almost straight away, and he did his due diligence. He had a look around at some of the other stuff that Pencil Tip have done. I'd sent him a couple of draft stories and outlines, so he could see the kind of thing we were going to be writing about. And some of the stories are controversial in nature. So I wanted to be absolutely, play fair and say that we are going to be touching on some subjects which might not please everybody. And he was great with it. He said, "No, this is fine." And he wrote I think it's a very personal forward, because sometimes you read forwards and they can be a little bit generic. And I think Yiji's is very personal and very connected to the theme of the book as well, about changed lives. And he talks about a particularly harrowing experience in his own life. And he's been a tremendous support. He retweets, he promotes the book for us, posted on his social media. So it's been an absolute pleasure having him involved. And I think for the writers to have somebody, an actor from the show connected to the project, it's been a real boost for them as well. And it lends a validity to the work we've done. So it's been a blast.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I would hate to be the 1 million and first person to ask him to do an interview, but I would like to talk to him someday. I know we have one thing in common, and it's Volkswagen Beetles. I was listening to or watching an interview with him where he was telling a story of driving his VW Beetle down to LA to audition for that movie. And I can relate to that because I've driven a Beetle all the way up and down the California coastline. His website. Yi has an excellent website. When starting to look into this book here, I went to his website and found out that it has an interactive feature, which I fully plan on signing up for as soon as I get a little extra time here. It seems as if he had the foresight in 1996 to take a nice high-end camera to work with him, and he photographed some behind-the-scenes shooting of the Doctor Who movie. And that's not something which is in a book form. it seems to be an interactive website and where you can sign up for a membership. And I had read about that in the past and completely forgotten about it, but I just saw that recently, and I'm definitely going to go check that out and sign up. So EG has a new supporter here coming soon.
Excellent.
One in California at least. So how did this book actually go down? You know, I see a good number of names here that I personally recognize. And what I'm wondering is, how did all these people come together? I mean, we're talking about people like Luke Dyer, Sean Collins, Paul Burns, Matthew Kressel, Greg Moggen, Allison Winter. There's another person I'd love to interview right there. She just recently had a Doctor Who Big Finish story come out. Russell McGee, Kevin Mason, James Hornby, R. Morgan Criffield, Richard Peevers, who you were just mentioning, where you finished up his story, yourself, James Silvester, Rob Nesbitt, and Hamish Crawford. And then the cover art's by John G. Swagger. I mean, how did this happen? Did you contact all of these people and say?
Well, it was a bit of a mix, because as you said from the title, it's number 3 in this series, and coincidentally,
Right.
the first Temporal Logbook, which would have been back in 2013-14 when I think they started encouraging stories for it, was actually the first bit of writing I ever had commissioned. I'd seen it, whether it was Facebook or Twitter or somewhere, I don't remember much now. And it said, look, we were a Canadian publisher, we're going to do a short story collection. We need a story for every Doctor, and we're looking for people to write it. And I threw a story together. I was in the middle of writing what became my first novel, my first book at the time. I thought, well, I've always wanted to do Doctor Who. So I threw a story together and sent it in, and very, blessed that they picked it up and ran with it. That was a 10th Doctor story. Then there was a second one that came out a year or 2 years later, and because they are real labors of love, there's a lot of work that goes into them. They had said, kind of informally between themselves at Pencil Tip, that they weren't going to do anymore.
And it was the first one.
After the second one, they'd done 2.
Oh, after the second one, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
They'd done 2, and it's well, we'll get onto it, I'm sure, but it's a lot to try and pull these things together, and the more Doctors you get, the more people you have to deal with. And it was because I had wanted to do something specifically for this charity. I'd finished off writing a novel. I was between things. I wanted to do another Doctor Who, do something a bit different from the spy thriller stuff that I do in the day job, as it were. So there's the particular charity I wanted to do something to support, and thought, well, a good way of doing that would be one of these collections, because every Temporal Logbook is the proceeds are donated to worthy causes. I think the first one was an HIV charity in Canada, and the second was a mental health charity also in Canada. So I got in touch with Bob Furnell, who is the owner of Pencil Tip, and said, look, have you got any plans to do a third one? Because I was going to do something similar and I wouldn't want to step on your toes. And he came back and said, well, we hadn't got any plans, but if you want to do it, go ahead. If you want to take the reins on it. And he also very kindly agreed that we could use it to support my charity of choice. So once that was there, Pencil Tip have a nice stable of writers who regularly write across a lot of their ranges. So
really, okay.
yeah, there's if you go through some of their other publications, you'll come across similar names quite a lot. So we went out initially to the stable and said, look, this is a new project we're putting together. If you're interested, drop me an email and I'll go through the details. So I picked up a few of the writers that way. People like Matthew Kressel, who's brilliant. He not simply just for Pencil Tip, but he does an awful lot of fan fiction. He's one of those people you can always rely on to turn you out a good story.
Yeah, I've seen his name many times.
Yeah, he does it really quickly. I don't mean it at all derisively, but I think of him as the Terrence Dicks of fan fiction in a way. Because if you want a story, he will write it. He must have a computer up there somewhere full of Doctor Who fan fiction. So people like Matthew came on board at that point, and then it was an open submissions process. So we put a comms info package together on Pencil Slip's website, and hammered it on some of the forums and Twitter and places like that to try and encourage applications.
That's right. Okay, I remember that now.
Right. Yeah.
I do recall that now.
Mm-hmm. And that's where we picked up most of the other people. Alison is the exception to that, because I kind of headhunted Alison a little bit. Alison, it's great because through doing this, she's become a friend, which is it's lovely to to make new friends in the fandom and things like that. So it's been great having her on board, and it was just by chance really, because Alison and people like Rob Valentine, who's another big Finnish writer, whose name I'm sure you're familiar with. During that first lockdown in 2020, they were people, two of the people who because there's nothing else you could do really. You'd go online, look at Twitter, and you'd look for particular people, what they were up to, and you all kind of coaxed each other along the hellish experience we were all having.
Right.
And so I got to know at that point. I didn't know at the time that Alison was going to be doing Big Finish. But I said, look, I've got this project. I know you're a Doctor Who fan. I think you're a good writer. You're a brilliant writer. Would you have time to get on board with this? And the planets aligned, and she did, and I'm really grateful for it. So, in a nutshell, it's a bit like the Blues Brothers now, isn't it? Getting the band back together. This is how we pulled everybody from all these different places to get the book together.
Very interesting. Okay, I follow Alison Winter and Rob Valentine on Twitter. It seems like at least now in 2022, it seems like Twitter is the real hot spot for Doctor Who fans. And it used to be forums in the past, but people seem to have migrated to newer technology. And both of them seem like very kind, interesting people. And the ones that stand out, I actually didn't use Twitter during lockdown. When my family purchased the timescales when it was going to close, it came with a Twitter function. We did not acquire the Twitter account because you can't buy and sell Twitter accounts. So my brother assigned me to be the Twitter person, basically to give the site a personality. And I wasn't much interested in it at first, but we were able to create the Timescales Twitter account. And then I started following all of these authors and what have you. And then I got addicted. I'll tell you what, there is nothing like being addicted to Twitter. I have to actually regulate a time set during the day, but yeah, it seems like everybody's on there. The Doctor Who Twittersphere is not that large. The longer you look at it, and the authors that dedicated their time during lockdown have my undying respect, because I'll tell you what, if there was ever a time when people needed and could use Doctor Who for escapism, it was during that hell of lockdown.
Absolutely, and Emily Cook obviously was a big inspiration behind that with the watch-alongs. It's like any fandom, it has its more unpleasant aspects. Than it can get very divisive on there sometimes, but I think for the main, and certainly from the writers and the authors that are on there, as you say, they're incredibly generous with their time, and they're incredibly supportive of other people who come along. So from that point of view, although it's been hard work to pull the book together, it's been an absolute delight getting to meet some new people and work with them, collaborate on a project. So
right, and now the work is done.
It is, yes.
It's out there. Yeah. Time to pat yourself on the back then. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, pencil tip. As I mentioned, when our family bought the timescales to prevent it from going out of business and just basically save it for fun, one of the jobs that came with it is maintaining the catalog of stories. and I also inherited that job. I worked with the lady that was doing it previously, and she taught me how to update and add the stories. And that's how I discovered Pencil Tip. One of their new books had just come out, so I had to learn how to get it listed on the timescales where people could review it if they would like to. And all this time, I have thought that Pencil Tip was a British company. Is it?
No, they're based in Vancouver.
In Canada?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, Canadian publisher, and they've been going a hell of a long time, and there's a lot of different projects that they have. So they have a very long running fan fiction series called the Doctor Who Project, which is essentially imagines that the show never ended in '89, and they've continued with their own run of Doctors, and write stories in that continuity, which is lovely, and that's got a very dedicated following. They have a regular fanzine that they produce. They did Sarah Jane, not Sarah Jane Adventures. I think it was chronologically was set before that time, but again a fan fiction collection. And Sadie Miller did the forward for that, who plays her mum's character for Big Finish now. She provided the forward, which again was lovely. And they do.
Hey, Sadie Miller isn't her mother Elizabeth Sladen?
Yeah.
And
now Sadie plays Sarah Jane for Big Finish.
Right.
So
exactly.
So it was lovely to get Sadie involved in that. And a couple of slightly off-genre things. They have a couple of horror anthologies that I think have just been re-released called Grave Warnings. And they're a mix of horror styles, a lot of the M.R. James style and some modern stuff as well. So that's something different to Doctor Who, but very popular for them. So they've been great to work with. And as I said, I'm really, really grateful to them for letting me take the reins on this one.
Okay, so for people that end up watching this interview on YouTube, we're going to put a link down to Pencil Tip down to the bottom here, and I would encourage people to go check it out. It's quite impressive. And you mentioned that they have a fanzine.
Yes, and its name has now eluded me because you put it
okay, yeah.
But I will link.
I've seen.
I know. It's Hootopia.
Hootopia. That's
Hootopia.
It right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had when I was looking at the list of authors and story titles, I noticed, wait a second, this says published by Pencil Tip Publishing, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I'm like, why did I always think that was in England? So I guess my bound copy of Temporal Logbook is probably en route from Canada. I thought that it was coming from the UK. I ordered it on Lulu, and we're going to get to that. We'll come back to that. For fans in America that want to order this book, you can order it in US dollars. The shipping is super cheap. You don't have to worry about paying like $30 to have a book shipped from England. I think it was $4 or something to have it shipped, but we'll come back to that, and we're going to put an ordering link as well.
Thank you.
Now, yes, sir. And okay, so we've learned about Pencil Tip. It sounds like a very interesting, generous company that people need to be aware of. Now, this is a charity publication, this anthology, Temporal Logbook 3, and all of the proceeds go to a charity which is called Settled. And could you tell us about that charity and why you selected it?
Sure. Well, Settled is an independent charity in the UK that provides advice and support for EU citizens living in Britain. Specifically because of the aftermath of Brexit, which I'm sure people will know about. It's the UK's departure.
I've read a lot about it. I cannot claim to fully understand it, though.
Even its proponents don't fully understand it, so don't worry about it. But for people who've been affected by the departure from the European unions, Europeans living here had to apply for settled status, whereas before they had freedom of movement and could stay could stay in the UK freely. It's not at all that simple anymore. The process itself is laborious and inefficient, and causes all manner of problems. So simple everyday things like trying to get rent agreements, get a job, trying to get in and out of the country on holiday, ridiculously difficult now, far more difficult than they ever used to be. And there are a lot of instances of people in care, either elderly people in care or young children who were in care homes, who did not have anybody to make these applications for them, or people who were not aware they had to make this application, who now found themselves in all manner of trouble because they don't have legal right to be here anymore. they also, with the Ukraine war going on, they're doing a lot of work with Ukrainian refugees as well.
Okay.
So it's very important at the moment, and I have a personal connection to it because my wife is from Slovakia.
Okay.
So yeah, right from the time the referendum was happening in this country, you're very conscious of the level, how the levels of abuse have risen, the anti-foreigner sentiment, a lot of abusive comments, a lot of difficult things. So having seen, my wife and other family and friends go through that, it's inspired me to want to try and do something about it. I'm not really I'm not a natural campaigner. I'm really uncomfortable talking to anybody ever. So,
right.
So yeah, the idea of standing in the street on a soapbox or knocking on doors, I just wouldn't be able to do it. But
right.
About the only thing I am able to do is write stories, and probably not very well. So I thought, well, this will be a way of trying to support it.
Okay, now that's very interesting, and I can relate a little bit. To begin with, 99.8% or more of everyone that lives over here in the States come from families of immigrants. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know how that seems to have been forgotten by some people. Our family in particular came from the Netherlands, and that was a long, long time ago, and Ireland. The native Americans are very few and far between here now. It's a very small percentage. And my wife is an immigrant. She came here from Japan, and she came here for an education. She wanted to get a PhD. That's not a 4-year course. And it took her 9 years, but she's got it. And I watched her go through difficulties of learning English. I watched her go through some insanely stupid things that should never happen to anybody, such as her very first phone. She had to put a security deposit of like $1,000 just because she's not an American. I mean, that's only one small example.
Right. Yeah.
We had to go through when we got married, we had to be interviewed by the Department of Homeland Security to make sure that it wasn't a fake marriage. And they didn't let us do it in our city. They said, okay, well, you need to meet us here, and gave us this city like 6 hours away. And we're like, I mean, you have no choice. So I've seen some really stupid stuff like that happen. We had to drive for 6 hours to have some government guy ask me, hey, Greg, is this a fake marriage? And what would happen if I contacted your parents? Would they tell us that this is a legitimate marriage? I mean, just insanely stupid stuff. So, thank you for supporting a charity that tries to make things easier on people, because we need to encourage dignity.
Well, it's exactly that. It's treating people like human beings.
Right.
And
right.
I think probably in both our countries we seem to have forgotten how to do that, in at least large chunks of it.
Yeah.
The population has.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but okay. So I'm going to ask you a question here, and I warned you. I've got a funny, silly comment on this also. I'm going to ask you, what is an editor? And I know what an editor is according to Wikipedia, because I read it last week when I was working on these questions for you. But I had a somewhat derogatory view of what an editor is, and that's all thanks to Star Wars. And going back to the 70s here, and I'm not talking about Star Wars A New Hope or Star Wars Episode 4 or anything like that. I'm talking about Star Wars, just plain Star Wars as it came out when George Lucas first titled it. It didn't have other names or numbers. It was just called Star Wars. And I loved it so much that I bought the novel, and the novel had extra things that were not in the movie. And I remember riding my bike to the theater and watching that movie all day long, because it used to be in the 70s where as long as you were in the theater, they wouldn't ask you to leave. You could sit there all day. You could watch the movie 5 times in a row. I think the most I ever watched it was 3 times in a row. But I do know I finished counting how many times I'd seen it at over 130. And
Excellent.
was after it had came out on VHS. But here's what happened. When I read the Star Wars novel, I loved it so much because of the additional things that were not in the movie, that one day I discovered that it had been edited, and I was devastated. I thought, edited? What? Who would do that, and why? And I was thinking, editors, that's got to be pretty pompous for them to edit something out that I might enjoy. What gives them the right? So now I do know that's wrong. Okay, I do realize that I had the wrong opinion of editors back then, but I just thought I'd share that silly story with you. But so what exactly is an editor? What did you do with this book, the Temporal Logbook 3?
Sure. Well, do you know what? I'd say first off, I used to share your opinion of editors.
Nice.
Being a professional author, I've met my fair share of editors who insist on taking things out that I've written, and I have exactly that reaction of, why are you taking away this? I spent hours working on this.
So I'm not that far off.
No. It's for this one. I should put it out there straight away, just in case we get any hate mail coming in. I'm not what you'd call a commas and colons kind of editor. I'm not. Although I'll do a grammar check through it, I'm not particularly looking for that that kind of level of stuff. It's about shaping the story and giving the theme of the story. So for this one, it was really my decision to go with the theme of changed lives, and then to try and make sure everybody who submitted a story or an idea for a story said, well, it's got to be something that fits into this. It fits into this brief. You've got to nail the brief in some way. It's got to be about a life that is changed by meeting the Doctor, in a good or bad way. When those stories then started to come in, yes, there's an element of it where you are cutting things out, and that's usually for pacing. So it's a short story collection. The stories ideally should be between 5,000 and 8,000 words. Particularly where we have 14 Doctors, we have to for 14 stories we had to write for, and we had the foreword as well. We have the author bios at the end. So it's, for a fan fiction collection, it's a pretty sizable volume. So it was pacing things in that way. To give a common idea of what was happening through the stories. I decided I didn't want to leap into each story with the assumption that the audience, or the reader, I should say, knew who the Doctor was and knew what the TARDIS was. So if it was a case of, you wouldn't open scene one and you'd be in the middle of a conversation and you'd assume that the reader knew all of that lore and history. So I tried to encourage them to say, well, we'll just change things so that we see an introduction of why the POV character knows who these people are, or how they come to know that this is the Doctor, this is their companion, and this big blue thing is called the TARDIS, and it's a time and space machine. So trying to work that in organically through their stories. Yes, there were occasions I had to take things out, and it was really for pacing, or if something I could see what they were trying to do, but it wasn't quite working. So it's a lovely idea, but we'll take that, hold it in the mental bank for another story in another time. Okay. And yeah, it was really that way. It was about shaping the story to fit the pacing that we needed, to fit the structure we needed, and to make sure that the tales hit the briefs. And there were a number of rewrites involved. We've mentioned Richard, who he had a lot going on in his personal life. He wasn't able to finish the story, so I picked that up and finished it working with him. There were a couple of other people who needed a bit of help with how to redraft and how to get the story looking in a particular way. So I'd work a bit more with some authors than others. That's not in any way to bring detriment to anybody. It's simply a way of working.
Right. So you're a kind editor, and you help people when they need.
I try to be, and there's also the it's a fan project. Everybody's doing this in their own time. So we had a lovely mix of professional writers and new people. This is the first thing they've ever been commissioned for. But ultimately, everybody's doing it for free. They're doing it when they can. Life happens. We all, most of us had day jobs as well. That we have, got to do something to pay the bills. We all have professional writing commitments as well. So this was something that was great fun to do, but had to fit in around everything else. And you have your personal life commitments as well. You can't come home and say to your significant other, I'm not going to talk to you tonight because I have a fan fiction story to write for this guy in England.
Right.
I've
wondered
I'm not getting paid
about,
for.
yeah, I've wondered about how that's dealt with, because yeah, of course, life has to come first, especially families.
Absolutely. And Bob warned me about that when we took the project on. Said, look, if you want to launch this in a year, be ready for it to take 18 months or longer. Because
so it was not Bob's first rodeo, that's for sure.
Oh no, that's why he said he wasn't going to do another one.
Okay.
But people have writing gigs, and where you are dealing with, there's not just Alison Russell is a designer for Big Finish. Rob Nesbitt has written for Big Finish. So you've got people who have that kind of stature, and then you have me saying, by the way, that story you're doing for free that I've imposed on you, I want it next week, please. You've got to be realistic about these things. Yeah. You've got to say, well, okay, we want to launch it on this particular date and time, but it's going to slip. I think we planned to launch it in June this year, and it became October. It's simply because people have jobs, people have other commitments,
right?
And it isn't a paid gig where you can be a bit harsher with the stick, as it were, and say, look, this is a deadline. We've got commercial commitments around it, so we need it now. So you have to be a little bit gentler, and naturally, because I wouldn't call myself an editor necessarily, really, but because I'm primarily a writer, I know it bloody hurts to see things taken out of your story. Unless there is a good reason for it. So where I was doing that, I didn't do too much of it, but where I was doing it, I would try and explain. And I did have a few Zoom calls with people to say, look, this is why I think it should read this way. And it was a bit of back and forth, a bit of debate around it. And more often than not, they agreed and came down. There were a couple of scraps, but we're all friends now.
Okay. Wow, that sounds like a massive amount of work. 278 pages, I think, and sounds like a big chunk of your life for a year.
Do you know what? It really was. Yeah, it really was.
If people have not considered purchasing this book yet by now, I think they probably should. And we're gonna plug it here again at the end. I think people should go out and purchase this, buy it for Christmas, for someone you love or yourself.
There will be a Christmas discount, by the way. I'm just waiting for the numbers. So in December, I'm not sure how much it is off, but there will be something off. So there'll be some promos coming out about that.
Okay, you know what? People need to follow you on Twitter. I suspect you probably have not received a lot of hate mail, because you come across as being a nice person to follow on Twitter. I'm glad I did, because I don't have to worry about your tweets. I know that whenever I see that James Silvester has tweeted something, I know it's going to be pleasant or fun or both. So we're gonna put in the closing title card, it's going to have your Twitter link, and I would encourage everybody to just go follow you. So we've covered what an editor is, and but let's talk about you for a moment. That way, when people see that name, James Silvester with an I, on their screen, that they may know a little bit more about you.
Yes, they'll know to switch off and click on someone else.
Yeah, no, that's me. So, who are you? Where are you from, and what drives and motivates you? What kind of things do you like?
Oh wow! Well, I'm from right here. I've lived in Manchester I've lived in Manchester all my life. Not always in the same house. So yeah, Mancunian born and bred, as it were. But I have travelled quite a lot, and I spend a lot of time in Slovakia and the Czech Republic.
Okay.
And that was interesting, because I at university I studied politics and modern history, political history. So my grand intention at the time was to move to America and become a professor in an American university, teaching comparative US and UK politics, and that never happened.
Wow.
But life happens, and it didn't work out that way. But yeah, so the writing has kind of always been there. But I fell down the trap of getting a proper job.
Okay.
Which I don't know. I hate to say one has regrets, but looking back, I do regret not making a bash at this sooner, because I still have a day job now, but it's not something that's ever going to be particularly fulfilling, as it were. And you don't write to make money, unless you're one of a handful of superstar authors. You're never going to make enough money to pay.
Like Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you've got a Sandman in your back pocket, you're not going to make enough to live off this. Or at least now that I have the mortgage and the kids and the bills and all the rest of it, I couldn't say, well, I'm going to jack in the job and we're going to live and survive on my writing earnings now. So
right.
That wouldn't be fair.
Well, you're still young. You have youth on your side.
Bless you. I just use a lot of oil of Ulay.
Okay.
But now, growing up, in my teenage years and in my early 20s, people were saying, you should write for a living, and it's nice, it's flattering to hear, and you always think it's something I will do in between, getting the day job together. But then eventually the day job takes over your life, and it was. I think I've probably told this story before, but so I'm sorry if I'm boring people. But it was a bad day.
Not boring.
But it was a bad day at work. I think it was that persuaded me to make a go of it. And it was my son, who's 14 now, but he'd just been born. And I came back in. The company I was working for at the time, they didn't give paternity leave at that time. Certainly not paid. So I had to take a few days and holiday pay. So I could be at home for a little bit and then come back in. And on my first day back in the office after he was born, the MD called everybody down to the sales floor that we were on at the time, grand names for these things, and made this big speech about motivation and being a success in his company, and looked at me and said, and if you want to succeed in my company, you have to put the job before your family. So, well, I'm not going to be succeeding in this company. So,
yeah.
Cheerio. So it was that. I just went home, stomping my feet. Thought, well, I'm going to try and write a book. It took a while to get there, but that's what persuaded me to actually, the rat race, as it were. It's for a lot of people, but it isn't for me. I'm not impressed with stature and job titles, and I don't particularly want to earn $1 million. I just want to write stories.
Yeah. Okay. Now you mentioned something interesting here, which we were going to get back to, and I guess let's get back to it now. Writer's block. As I told you this morning before we started the interview, I've interviewed a very large amount of musicians and bands, and for public radio, and one thing that I have heard over and over again is about a creative block. I think one of the records goes to someone who is quite famous, in fact, and they went for about 7 years of having no ability to write. And then all of the sudden, one night, and not chemically induced, one night he sat down and wrote an entire album plus 5. He wrote more songs than what was even required by the label after a 7-year block. So I consider to be a professional because I've researched your works. And what I'm wondering is do you experience gaps to where there's just no creativity there? Does it come and go?
It does. I mean, writer's block as a concept. There's lots of different theories about what it is, where it comes from. When my children were smaller, when they were babies and toddlers, writing was easy because I was younger. And I would write
those cherished times that go by too fast.
Yeah. I wrote at night. And thinking back on it, there was actually an awful lot going on. Certainly, the time of my second book, certainly, possibly the third as well. I was essentially nursing my dad to death at the time. I was caring for him at home for a long time. He wasn't well. He was getting worse. The kids were small. need a lot of care. But I'd have the kids in bed for whatever time at night. I'd have my dad settled down by 10 p.m. My wife works in the emergency services, so quite often she was out working at night on the night shift. So from 10 o'clock every night till about 1, 2 in the morning, I would write. And so whatever else was going on, I had that as writing time. That's got a lot worse. Not worse, wrong word. It's more difficult as the kids have got older. They're up later. they never seem to go to bed now.
Right.
There's always people around me, and I'm sure you'll hear a lot of creatively minded people, if I can use the grand terms again, will probably say that they need to be alone. They need solitude to work properly. So that really hit home again with lockdown, when all of a sudden I was in the house with 4 other people who never ever left me alone ever. There was nowhere in the house where I could be alone. And by the time they were in bed, I was 10 years older. I was knackered. I couldn't do it in the way that I did, and my brain wasn't in the right zone to then start pulling a story out. I tried to write one which I really didn't like. I didn't go so far as to have a bonfire of the vanities and burn it, although I was tempted to, and it just wasn't happening. And it wasn't then until we gradually started to come out of lockdowns and then back into them and all the rest of it that I was able to start writing quite freely again. Now I think I am there. I've got a project on at the moment with an actor friend, so I'm writing an audio book, which is a bit different from what I have done before. And the plan is we'll release this independently together. I'll write it, he'll record it, produce it, and we'll find a way to take it to market somehow.
Please let me know what that is. I
will
hear that when it comes out.
I'll drop you a line. I'm not at liberty to say right now, but I'll drop
that's understandable. Yeah,
I'll drop you a line with it. But it's there have been times again, because the day job is very hectic, and again, I'm not doing it for a commission. So you're just like with Temporal Logbook, you're not getting paid for it at the moment. You're writing in advance and hoping that somebody someday will pick it up and give you some money for it. Okay. So it's not like I can say, well, I'm going to take 6 weeks off work and write a book. So it is more difficult at the moment, but it's getting there. And certainly lockdown, as is probably the case for a lot of people, was hellishly difficult to ever write anything. And I think I went best part of a year without actually writing a page. So,
okay. During lockdown. Yeah. Okay. So what is the primary reason for that being, as you've said, hellish? That lockdown. I think I know, but I want to hear you say it.
Well, I think to paraphrase, Jean-Paul Sartre, it's hell is being trapped in a room with your friends. But it sounds horrible, and I sound like a cantankerous old misanthrope when I say it. I love my family dearly. I've always been someone who is comfortable on their own. I don't need people around me, and in fact, to work creatively, I need them not to be there. I need to be alone. So when I'm writing now, I will take days off work when I know my wife's working, when the kids are at school, and I can be alone and write, to try and do it with people around me.
Okay.
I just find it extremely difficult.
Well, there's another reason that people need to go out and order Temporal Logbook, as in like just right now, just go ahead and order it, because you have some spare time by yourself and you're giving it back to fandom. So that is very much appreciated. So we're pretty well along here. We're almost done. I've got a couple more questions for you here. Aside from Doctor Who and literature at all, do you have any other hobbies? It almost sounds like you may not have time for other hobbies.
Well, I don't so much these days, but similar to yourself, I used to do internet radio DJing a long time ago now.
Oh, okay.
So I did mod radio. I don't know what kind of music were you involved in. What did you do your journalism on?
Oh, it was a broad range for public broadcast. It
cool.
Everything from rock and roll to new wave.
Cool. Well, we did. We specialised in mod music. So it's the British movement. I think in America you'd call it the British invasion of the 60s. Yes. So when the Stones and people came over and playing, you had a bunch of white bands playing black music.
Right. So
the
Monkees.
Absolutely. I love the Monkees, and they're really underrated as well. Really underrated.
Yes, absolutely.
but stuff like that. And the scene at the time in England was the mods and the rockers were like, I suppose, like the greasers. They had the John Travolta hair, leather jackets, and motorbikes. Mods, smartly dressed in suits, like Beatles haircuts, rode scooters. So mod radio was, when I did. I think it's still going actually, but I've not done a show on it for a long time. So that was a big thing. I used to briefly, with some friends, played in a blues band long time ago. We were monumentally awful. And I was the vocalist, which was a mistake because I'm tremendously socially awkward. So trying to put me in front of people and asking me to sing was probably not the wisest of choices. So I played harmonica.
You're not alone there.
Yeah. So I played the blues harp and sang. I was more confident in those days than I am now, though. So maybe we got away with it. So yeah, I'd say music, but again, there is so little time now. So little time.
Do you still have a harp?
I've got loads of harps. I've got a couple on the shelves behind me up there.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There's I've always wanted to learn to play a harp. That's one of the most beautiful. Those are underrated.
Oh, they are.
Harps are absolutely underrated. Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. So, all right. So back to Doctor Who for a moment. And when did you start watching Doctor Who, and who's your doctor?
Oh, yes. Quite honestly, I don't remember a time when I didn't watch it, because my dad and my older brother were watching Doctor Who, and I just simply, it's my earliest memories of watching television was Peter Davison would have been the Doctor at the time. Okay. I'm told I used to have one of these, plastic telephones on a cord, little red thing with a smiley face on it when I was really young, and I'm told I used to pick up and ask to speak to Nissa all the time. I was apparently obsessed with Nissa from a very early age. So I couldn't tell you which was the first one I saw. I have memories of various episodes, but they're flashes in the pan. Peter, Colin, and Silvester were my doctors. I love them all. And I think probably season 24 was when I started to religiously watch it of my own volition and say, right, well, Doctor Who's on, I'm going to watch it now. And that was probably when my dad had kind of stopped watching it. And well, I'm going to, what we used to do, we used to record it, and I'd watch it in the morning before school because my dad didn't want to watch it anymore. And that's just coming back to me now. I think if I remember rightly, it was on after we had a chat show host here called Terry Wogan. He was a big thing in the 80s, and his show was on, and then Doctor Who would be on right after it. Or maybe they stood the way around. I don't know. I'm losing myself in asinine memories now. But that's when I first started watching it.
You'd record it on a videotape?
Yeah, on a VHS tape, and then I'd play it before school the morning after. And I remember being really upset when it ended in '89. So yeah, I would have been around 9 or 10 when it ended, and also then being really excited when it came back for that one episode with Paul McGann and Yuji, and loving it and saying, well, where's the series? But it didn't do so well in the States, so it never came. And then you think, well, that's it, it's dead. But also, I don't think it's completely unique to Doctor Who. You see it in things like Family Guy. Never has a show been more full of references to the 80s and 80s pop culture. Seth MacFarlane grew up in the 80s, and that's imprinted on every episode. But I think it's across television. You had people growing up who watched these shows who were suddenly in charge of TV, and they're going to bring things back. And Doctor Who, when Chris Eccleston came out with it, it was just dynamite. So I've watched it, aside from the hiatus, I've watched it my whole life. Okay. And I've now I said I would show you, didn't I? If I can adjust this just today.
There we go. I just saw that on Twitter. I knew you were going to do it. I knew you were going to do it because you told me, and you did it, and it's on Twitter.
And my God, it hurt.
I can imagine. I'm trying to think of what I would get for a tattoo. I don't have one yet. I've always thought, what is something I would want that is important enough to me to have it stick around for a while. And a TARDIS. Yeah, I think I would do a TARDIS, and I would also do my daughter's names. So I think that when I decide on one, I need to get the font right. So
okay, you can get a TARDIS and you can get their name. We're going to talk, sorry everyone, we're going to talk tattoo designs now. And you get the TARDIS and have their names incorporated into it. Because for a while,
that's a really good idea. That's a really good idea. Okay.
I just want other people to have TARDIS tattoos now. This is going to be a key theme of talking to me.
There is a tattoo shop right down the street. Okay. All right. So that's awesome, James. Everybody go check out his TARDIS tattoo. It's actually the most elaborate one I've ever seen. Now, I haven't seen a lot of TARDIS tattoos, but there are a number of people that have them that you can find them on Instagram for reference, but that's the best one right there.
I love it. He's a really good. I've got another one. I'm going to show you another one now. I have a Riddler question mark there.
Oh, so there we go. Has Silvester McCoy seen that? Well, have you showed that to Silvester McCoy?
Next time I see Silvester, I'll be sure to roll my sleeve up for him. Yeah, that's what some people do. I saw it on TV once. They met all the living doctors and had them sign autograph his arm. And then as soon as he goes to his tattoo artist, and he inks it on permanent. So he's got an armful of all the doctors, all the living doctors, autographs on his arm. I think that's a cool idea.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So do you go to conventions?
Not so much anymore. When I was younger, yeah, we were a bit starved of them where I live. We had for a couple of years convention called VWARP. Which was in Manchester. Yes. Yeah, which was in Manchester. I took my son along to them. He got to meet Peter Davison, who he loved. That certainly at the time that was his favorite. And he met Colin. He's got a great picture of him and me with Colin and Nicola, and him with Peter. And he's met Silvester and Sophie as well, who were always lovely. So we had a couple of years of really, really good conventions, but then COVID hit, and unfortunately, it did. Unfortunately, the promotion company behind it have said, look, they just can't afford to do it now. The cost has spiraled. They can't get the venues in the way that they did. So that hiatus of 2-3 years has meant they're not going to do anymore. So although there's quite a few in Liverpool, and we do get a Comic Con normally once a year in Manchester. So I'll probably try and get to that this year, but. Yeah, it's a real shame we're not going to have Doctor Who specific conventions probably for a while now.
Okay. That's interesting to hear from somebody in England, because we kind of us people over here in the States, well, myself, are kind of jealous because it seems like there's a Doctor Who convention in England every weekend or something like that. But here we have a couple of annual ones, but they're always I've found them to be too far away and too expensive. We go to Chicago twice a year, but it's not during the convention time, or it hasn't been. And then they have a big one down here in LA, which we're actually considering going to. Of the list of actors you mentioned, I've only met one, Sophie Aldred. And I say met, not in person.
You did that brilliant. You did that brilliant interview with her. It was lovely. It was a lovely conversation.
Thank you. Yeah. Sophie is a very kind professional. And that interview was really fun to do. But she had mentioned to me that she was going to be in LA, I guess not long from now. And the question came down, can I convince my wife to put the 6-year-olds in the back of the car and drive for 10 hours one way? Because it takes a while to get to LA. And then once you get there, the traffic is atrocious. So, but anyway, all right. So you did do some conventions. Now, go ahead. You were going to say something?
No, I was simply going to say they're not the cheapest things. So,
yeah, they're not. And
when you have family, everything becomes more difficult, doesn't it? But,
right. Yeah, you've got to you have to. It's probably wise to budget fandom. We had who was it? William Shatner. William Shatner was in town recently, and I had an invitation to get a photograph with William Shatner for $200. Guess what? The $200 is still in my pocket.
That's a hell of an invitation.
I think what I'll do is just take myself and Photoshop myself into a picture with William Shatner. Save the $200. Okay, so now you're just an author and editor, of the Temporal Logbook 3. You have non-Doctor Who works such as Escape to Perdition and The Prague Ultimatum. Could you tell us about those? I think I picked up something Your wife is from the Czech Republic.
Yeah, well, she's from Slovakia. I did meet her in Prague.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And it was one of those, nice little symmetries of life. I'd studied. I probably didn't complete my point when I was waffling on earlier on, but I'd studied things like.
Sorry, you did. You did.
Oh,
I thought you said Czech Republic. I misheard. Slovakia, Czech Republic, same thing, right?
Well, I always said it was a shame they split up as a country. But that's probably a very long topic. But
I used to call it Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, it was until it was January '93 when they separated, and it was one of those decisions that literally was decided by men in smoky rooms. It was there was no public consultation, as it were. It was just we are separating. So I've always thought that was a real shame. But I probably shouldn't go down that road. But I'd studied things like the Prague Spring, the Warsaw Pact invasion in '68, and the Velvet Revolution in '89. I'd studied all that when I was at college and uni, and I'd always been fascinated by it. And I'd grown up, reading, John le Carré, Spy Who Came In From the Cold, and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, etc., which had a large portion set in Prague, and Fleming, the original Bond books. So I always had an affection for, I suppose you'd say, Cold War imagery, which sounds horrendous when you say it out loud, but essentially that's what it was.
Yeah, it does.
So I'd gone to Prague to a friend's wedding. They're British people, and they used to travel everywhere all over the world, and they love Prague and decided to get married there. And they had met my wife, Mirka. They'd met her several times before, and they'd become friends because she was a waitress or a manager, I should say, in the restaurant where they were having their wedding reception. And so I trotted along, kind of reluctantly because I was a single guy, impoverished. I couldn't really afford this trip to Prague. So, well, I'll come because my friend, you're getting married. I don't want to miss it. And they introduced me at their wedding to Mirka, and we eventually got married. So that was just a nice little symmetry. And now I spend an awful lot of time in that neck of the woods. And yeah, absolutely love it there.
Okay. Now, you also have a Lucy Musilova, and I hope I said that right. It's a thriller series with Blood, White, and Blue and Sealed with a Death. And these get really nice ratings online. So who is Lucy Musilova?
Well, Lucy is a half Czech, half British spy who has been press ganged into the service of Brexit Britain.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, it really was written in anger, both of those books, because that was all very Brexity.
Wow.
And it was it was my act of wanton rebellion against the the direction of our government at the time that I was writing them. Again, if you're going to protest, do it in a story.
Wow. Awesome.
So that's Lucy, and yeah, so she's the tagline for it was fighting for a country that hates her, or something like that. It probably sounds quite fatuous now looking back, but it was how I felt at the time. And Lucy as a character, based again partly, I don't want to sound like that dude out of Life of Brian, but it's partly based on my wife and people like her who working and in whatever capacity it is, but working and paying money and contributing to society that at the time certainly was not very fond of them. And there's all sorts of stories behind that, which I don't need to go into now, but that was the genesis of it. I intended to call her Romana. I don't know if I've said this before. I always fit Doctor Who references into my stuff. So I was going to call her Romana because that is a Czech name. And it was, at the time, I think it was probably 2016, 17. It was in the papers over here. It got quite a bit of news coverage at the time. There was a far-right, basically neo-Nazi rally in Brno, which is probably the second city in Czech Republic. And there was, it coincided with some scouts from the world, the scout movement, who were in this place, in this town square at the same time. And they were essentially ended up counter-protesting each other. And there was a very famous photograph. You can probably find it, and if I think I've got her name right now, but I probably haven't, and I'll apologize to her in advance. But there was a very famous photograph of a neo-Nazi skinhead, dressed in black glasses, screaming into the face of a young, she probably about 15, 16-year-old girl, young woman called, who was a scout, who was dressed in a scout uniform, called Lucy Mislikova, I think. I hope I haven't got her surname wrong. And she was completely, she was not intimidated. She stood her ground, stared back, and stared out these Nazi thugs that were there. And it's quite often, I think, when you look at movements, political protests, not exclusively, obviously, but it's quite often women who become the symbols of those movements, where you will see a lot of very aggressive men shouting down in the faces of women, people who they perceive to be less than them or weaker than them, and the women stand there and they take it and they face it and they don't back down to it. So it was just because of that picture, I said, well, I'll call her in honor of that Lucy. I'll call her Lucy and not just go for the twee Doctor Who reference this time.
Okay, very good. Very interesting. I'm gonna have to put those on my bookshelf, because after you interview someone, let me tell you about the interview process. First thing you do is you ask somebody if it's okay if you interview them, and then they say yes, and then you freak out wondering what in the world you've gotten yourself into. Okay, then you work on the questions, and then you stress out some more the day before, and then you interview the person, and it's really fun. And you feel like you know them now, which I guess it would make sense, because to interview someone, first of all, you need to know at least something about them in advance. You need to wiki them at the very minimum. And then after they answer your questions, why would it be a surprise to feel like you know them a little bit? Because they've answered your questions. So it's interesting to see that is consistent, not with just musicians, but also with Doctor Who people. And I think I told you the reason that I'm doing interviews. And if not, this may be repeating myself. As you know, my wife and I have twin 6-year-olds, and we bought them Minecraft for their gaming system at the age of 4. I did not read down at the bottom in the corner. It says age 7 and up. And the reason it says that is because you have to be able to read to play Minecraft. So that game went in. They got frustrated. We started trying to read everything on the screen to them. No. That is not viable. That's not. So we were going to do it anyway. We sent them into secondary reading school, and they learned to read really fast, and it was so that they could play Minecraft. And then when we tried to limit screen time, they started to go upstairs. After we insisted that they turn Minecraft off, they went upstairs and started to watch what? Minecraft on YouTube. So the question came up, hey, Daddy, can we make YouTube videos? Now, instead of me discouraging them and explaining that you are only 6 and no, you are not getting on YouTube yet, I decided, well, why don't I just tell them yes, but it's going to be a while, and then try to create some examples. So my wife and I were discussing it, and she said, well, you used to interview a bunch of people on the radio. She goes, why don't you just start interviewing a whole bunch of Doctor Who people? And I'm like, okay, problem solved. So the example is being set to show them at least one way of doing it, but at the same time, it is so enjoyable. It's very interesting. And so that being said, I'm going to go add your books to my bookshelf and fit them into the queue. I've got a good number of books that I need to and want to read. But
yes, the TBR pile. It never gets any smaller.
Yeah, good way of putting it. Okay, so what is a typical writing process like for you? Do you just sit down at a typewriter, insert a blank piece of paper, and type the story title by James Silvester, or is it more complicated than that?
Well, everybody's different. I don't really write in order, so I'll normally start off with characters that I want to write about, and some kind of scenario or some kind of message I want to say. So mainly on my last 2 books, I wanted to get all of my political anger out on the page.
There you go.
So it was. I will write particular scenes. I certainly don't write beginning and end. I'll have a scene in my head that I want, or a chapter that I want to write that day. I will write it, and then I'll go back and I will link it all together. Wow. And most of the time, the story kind of tells itself as you start doing that. So if I've written one scene, I've written two, three, four, five scenes of things I want to say and conversations I want characters to have, and then it will just start naturally thinking, well, how do they get to that position? You've got to write something that bridges this gap. How do they move on from there? How do they reach the resolution? I hate the expression "the twist," but is there is there the twist? And if you're writing spy thrillers, there's usually got to be some kind of twist at the end. And then I'll give it a once over then, and it's become a good well, not for me to say whether it's good, but it reads well in my head. Okay. So I don't think I've ever started page one and ended with the end. I really envy people who can write like that, because I'd love to. It would be a lot easier. But
okay.
That's not how I do it.
That's very interesting. That's you almost make it sound easy. But that's not what I expected to hear. That's very interesting. So do you recall when you were younger, maybe when you were a school kid, was there ever a mentor, somebody that encouraged you to become an author, or maybe someone told you that you have brilliance or talent or genius? Do you remember anything like that?
Not words like that, more colourful metaphors, I think, as Spock said in Star Trek 4, when they were describing me. No, I had friends. I used to love acting, and that was for some reason up until I was about 22, 23, maybe a bit younger. I actually had confidence in myself, and then that's gone out the window. And for whatever reason, I lost the acting bug. And then I've always wanted to write, but I was kind of talked away from it. It was the creative industries are fun, but they're things you do as a hobby. You get a proper job because you need a proper job. You have to get a mortgage, you have to pay the bills, and you have to have your 2.4 children and move on, retire at 17 and fade away on a golf course somewhere. I tried it, and it just isn't for me. Family aside, because I adore my family, but that way of working is simply not for me. If someone said to me tomorrow, you're the CEO of a blue chip company, then that company's dying on its arse 12 hours later, because there's no way I'm suited to that kind of role. I did have friends say you should be a writer, you should do this and that, but most people were kind of steering me away from it. What I did have, when I decided I'm going to give it a go, I did have a lot of encouragement. I'm a big fan of, I don't know if I'm sure you do have them over there, because he writes the Starbuck Chronicles as well, which is about the Revolutionary War. Read the Bernard Cornwell Sharps, the Sharp series. So they've got the TV films with Sean Bean around here, and they're fantastic books. Probably my favorite book style, which is odd because I'm not really into military history, fiction-wise anyway. But they're so well written and they're impeccably researched. And they're not the greatest works of fiction ever, or the greatest comments on the human condition, where you've got a good, exciting central character, flawed central character, very much an anti-hero in an exciting situation that is very well researched and is historically accurate, certainly for the most part. And that was when I started writing. That was really what I wanted to emulate. And I wrote to or emailed Bernard Cornwell, and he very kindly responded with some tips of how to do it, because I said, look, how the hell do you find the time to write? I have a full-time job, I have a young family. How do you do it? Can you give me some advice? And he was very kind, and he did write back and give me some tips on how to start and how to develop. And that was a real buzz, and I'll always be grateful for that now, because again, he is one of those authors who has made it in if you want to use that colloquialism.
And what was his name again?
Bernard Cornwell.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's so many films or TV series been made on his books. He's a guy who he doesn't have to work again, but he's still writing because he loves writing.
Right.
And when he's very, very willing to promote the work of new and upcoming authors. He did it with mine. He put my book, when it was released, on his website. He has a special section on his website where people can send in their book, say, I've written this, I'm a fan of your work, and he'll put it on and say, read this one, it's great.
Nice.
Which is a really lovely touch, because it's the kind of thing, like you're saying, when you've got people like Sophie and who'll come on and spend the time in a conversation with you. She doesn't have to do that,
Oh no,
no.
I was very, very surprised and very appreciative.
Yeah.
So Sophie is very kind. And it's she says she's not a fan of Doctor Who, which makes sense because technically she's a professional.
Yeah.
But I think she's a super fan.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So have you ever written yourself into one of your stories? I've always thought if I ever write a book, I'm going to put myself in it.
Obliquely, yeah. I think I can't speak for everyone, obviously.
Right.
All of my main characters have a little bit of me in them, and I think that's just because you're going to write about personal experience. I mean, there's certain things you can't do. The main character in my second book is he was a like 55-year-old black army captain, which I can't exactly identify with. Lucy, obviously, writing for a woman, and
that would be
I'm not a woman.
Sealed. Right. Now you're talking about the book Sealed with a Death.
Sealed with a Death and Blood, White and Blue. That's, the Lucy book. So I have a heroine, I have a female lead, which you're conscious of because you want to write well, you want to write properly, and not present some kind of pastiche characterization of what a man thinks a woman is and what a man thinks a woman acts like. So there's certain ways, but perversely, I think Lucy's probably the most like me out of all of them, which is, I'm not sure if I intended that, but yeah, I've never written a guy called James and he's exactly like me, but I think everybody has things in. All the characters have little bits of me in them because I'm a raging egotist.
Okay. Now I've read somewhere that authors have a success rate of less than 5%. I mean, that sounds crazy. Was I reading fake news?
I can believe it. I mean, it depends how you define success, of course, because
commercial, a check, money.
Then absolutely, authors don't make money. They don't make. I mean, there's several ways of doing it. I mean, you've got three basic routes to market, and that you can go with trad publishing with one of the big five publishing houses, Penguin, Random House, all those kind of people. Indie publishing, which is where I've always been, or self-publishing. I know authors who have gone on to make a hell of a good living from self-publishing. And I know authors who are with a trad publisher who are, barely have two pennies to rub together. Indie publishing has always been comfortable for me because I've worked with some great publishers and great editors. Matthew gave me my first shot at this kind of thing, so I'm always grateful for him. Bloodhound, who I'm with now, lovely, lovely people. You have far more creative control. So yes, the editing process is always going to be a bit of a bitch if we're honest about it, but you have far more input. If you're with a trad publisher, basically what they say goes. They will launch you into the big book chains, Waterstones, or I forget what the big chain is in America. Forgive me. I used to know. Them.
I'm sorry. I'm drawing a blank right now. Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So you'll get your launch in Barnes and Noble, and if you're not a bestseller in 6 weeks, that's it. They're not really going to invest time in you. Your indies will invest more time in you, so you'll have more say in how the book reads. Your cover design, where you're going to pitch it, etc. The flip side to that is you'll be expected to help out a lot more in the marketing and the promotion of this thing, and really rally your network. And you will probably end up with a bigger percentage of the deal, but obviously you're not really expected to sell as many. So it swings and roundabouts. I think when you get a book deal for the first time, and you write your book and you're really excited, and you should be, because it's a brilliant thing. But you kind of think that as soon as your book hits the stand, there is going to be an army of people. Everyone you've ever met in your life is suddenly going to rise up and go out and storm the high streets and buy your book. And they're not. They're really not. And nor should they. Books are not cheap. And I always thought if you halved the price of books, you'd sell twice as many, probably more. But it's not going to happen that way. So I completely believe, and a lot of the time it's just a hook. It's being in the right place at the right time. There's brilliant, brilliant authors out there who will never make it. They just never will. Same with actors, same with any creative. It's about you've hit the right spot at the right time. You've hit the zeitgeist, and then perversely, again, without being at all mean or unpleasant, you'll get something like 50 Shades of Grey, which started out as Twilight fan fiction, and she's rolling in it now. I mean,
I did not know that.
Yeah,
I didn't realize that.
It was Twilight fan fiction, which, to avoid being sued, she wrote into her own characters, released it, and my God, it just hit the right market. And again, I would say, for me, for my taste, I wouldn't say it was exactly the finest example of erotica out there. If you like that kind of fiction, it's fine. There are millions of good examples of it, but it just hit the right note at the right time. There was a gap in the market. There was a massive, mainstream media went behind it to promote it, and she's living the life of Riley now, and absolutely all credit to her. So the difficult thing for me, which I struggle with sometimes, but I'm a lot better than I used to be. I've always been looking at the authors I've known, and it can be a very competitive industry in that we all want that gig, we all want the bestseller, we all want that particular pitch, and we all want our movie, our books made into movies and all the rest of it. So some authors can be really unpleasant and unsupportive, but personally, I've always found the ones I've known, I've experienced to be incredibly supportive, mutually supportive, and certainly when I've been with particular houses, particular publishers. When one of us had a release, we would absolutely plug the hell out of their books, and you'd know that when you had one, they'd do the same, and we still do that now. People who haven't been with them in the same publishing house probably for years, but they will retweet about Temporal Logbook for me and say, "Look, go and read this," and I'll do the same.
I've seen that. Yeah, I have seen that going on.
Yeah, and it's lovely. It really is lovely because it is. We all do want to make it big in the traditional way.
Right.
And it can be difficult when you see someone get the gig that you really wanted. Again, probably like an actor, when you flick the telly on and you see someone playing the role that you auditioned for and thought you were perfect for and didn't get. It can be, but
that makes sense.
It's absolutely fine to be disappointed and to wish you had got it, but you should never really give in to jealousy. You should never become envious of that.
Right.
And you shouldn't let somebody else's success make you feel like you're a failure. And I do struggle with that because I'm always looking for ways to consider myself a failure, because I do think I am a failure. But it can be a hard thing to deal with. I think now, thankfully, most of the time I don't let it bother me. But for a while I did. Yeah, for a while I did.
Yeah, that would. I can imagine if all of a sudden next week I got on YouTube and found out that somebody just interviewed Tom Baker, because I would love to interview Tom Baker. He's my doctor. In fact, I would probably donate a sizable amount of money to his favorite charity if I could even get a hold of his agent, because I'd like to interview him. I wonder if he's ever going to do one again, because he's getting a little bit up in age. But you just that's an interesting. I'm glad that you said that, because I have not heard an author say something like that before, and it's an interesting perspective. And I don't see you as a failure. I've interviewed people where I told them that what I thought that their work was genius, and they were shocked. And then I was equally shocked at, why would you be shocked? It is genius. And then they'd come back like, no, actually it's not. And I think that some people don't have the ability to see their own success or something like that. But anyway, this is right here. This is the last of the less than pleasant things today. I promise. I believe that for anyone to think that when they decide to become an author or a musician or an editor, that suddenly they're going to have a Midas touch where everything they touch is going to turn to gold is a fantasy, and it's a fairy tale, because there is something which is called rejection, such as where you submit a book or a story, you might think it's the best thing ever, and you find that you're either completely ignored or otherwise declined or told that the story is not viable for whatever reason, declined, rejected. How have you ever experienced that? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Oh yeah, plenty. I mean, certainly when you're first looking for a publisher or an agent, however you want to do that, you're going to get rejected. You're not going to send one letter and get a fantastic, let's sign you up on a 6-book deal. You're going to get, thank you, no, it's not for us. You're going to get no response at all. Yeah, it's hard. I think the worst one I ever had, I had very lucky to have a meeting with quite a big name director. Actually does a lot of work in America as well. He's British and he doesn't live too far from me. And through circumstance, he got to hear about the books. I went for a meeting with him and his producer. He has his own little company. And yeah, they wanted to film it. They said the first two, Escape Expedition and Prog Ultimate. They said, we love these. We've read them. They're fantastic. We're going to have a Netflix series. We're going to have an Amazon Prime series. It's going to be the next big thing. And it was amazing to hear. And it was a case of, right, go away and write me a draft script. I said, well, I've never written, I had written scripts, but I've never written a script like this before. Are you sure? Yes, we want you to go away and write the script. And this is before any paperwork had been signed. So I did. I wrote scripts for both of them. They got them back. Yeah, this is great, fantastic. We'll be in touch. And then they're not. And then you send your follow-up emails and you chase your emails. And eventually they came back and said, look, we've waited up, but we've had to go with something else. We're in a position where we needed to go now, and we'd have to spend too much time on yours. So sorry, it's not going to happen. So you go from up there thinking, my God, I'm going to sell film rights, and this is going to be great. I'm going to get another 6 books out of this now. To really, oh shit, and then you wake up and you go into the day job that you hate and that you're only doing to pay the bills, and there's no way out because that's it now. That was really hard to deal with. It was very upsetting because I am a bit of a pessimist, but you do kind of allow yourself to give in the temptation of thinking, well, this really could be it. And this could be the start of something big. And it wasn't. And I think everybody probably has a story like that.
Okay.
I think most authors will have that contact. And, if you're a script writer, you'll have, and I've had it again with comedy scripts I used to write. I'll occasionally get interest in them, and then it never comes to anything. And these days I just don't think about it. And now I'm in a position anyway, which you should always be in. You're going to write, you write for yourself first. And if something happens from it, great. And if it doesn't, you're writing to keep yourself sane or to do whatever. So yeah, now I'm in a position where, yeah, if it happens, philosophically, fantastic. Once a contract's been signed, great, I'll believe it. But until then, it's pie in the sky. Yeah.
Okay.
It's pie in the sky. So there's all sorts of things I would love to happen and love to do. More or less at peace with the fact that it's probably not going to happen now. So I'll just do what I want to do. One reason for doing this current project, I'm not working for anybody. I'm working for me. I'm writing my story. Somebody else who's up for it is going to record it. It will happen in our own time, but it will happen. So I'm content with where I am now. Ask me next week, and I'll probably be rocking back and forth in a pile of my own toenail clippings again, saying how unfair life is. But there we are. For now, I'm happy.
Okay, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to that audio story. Is it? I know that you can't leak anything. Is it full cast or is it a dramatized reading?
I think it will be a dramatized reading. That's the way we're looking at it. So it'll be an audio novel of sorts. I'll be a little bit paranormal. I don't know if you had it in the States. If you remember things like Randall and Hopkirk, Deceased, and I don't know what they called it in America. Probably My Partner, the Ghost, or something like that. Probably gave it an Americanized title. And it was a '60s TV series about a private eye whose partner was dead, was a ghost. So it will be a little bit paranormal detective-y. Maybe I'm undecided. Is it going to be lighthearted or horribly dramatic? I'm not sure yet. That will come out in the writing.
Well, you said you've written comedy.
Yeah, comedy that's never been picked up. So.
Sounds like my luck. I've decided not to write comedy. People don't have the same sense of humor that I have, apparently. Comedy's not supposed to piss people off, right?
I think the best comedy pisses people off. That's great.
Okay. So have you ever submitted Doctor Who stories to BBC or Big Finish, or is that some type of a invitation only situation?
I think in the early days I probably did. Yeah, I did submit to the Paul Spragg opportunity when I was younger.
Okay.
The annual submission process. But as I understand it, it's kind of an invitation only, or if you're waiting for Big Finish. Again, it's one of those things. It's obviously something. Yeah, I'd kill to do it, but again,
Okay.
kind of made peace with the fact it's probably not going to happen. So
But you would
move
do
on
it
to other things.
if
Oh
if
God, yeah.
somebody okay, if someone
Yeah,
from Big Finish
if I got a
or
text now, I'd be stopping the interview. But so.
okay, gotcha. All right, that's what I wanted to hear. That's awesome. Okay,
Yeah.
so do you plan on or would you write commercial Doctor Who in the future, such as for and we're not talking about writing audios for BBC or Big Finish. We're talking about commercial novel type work, like for Penguin.
Oh yes,
Okay.
I absolutely love to do anything like that. I mean, that would be ideal for me.
Okay.
It's kind of all I've ever wanted to do was write Doctor Who. So
Okay.
that's
So
why. Yeah.
is Penguin invitation only, sort of like BBC
No
and
idea.
Big
No,
Finish?
I've always
Okay.
kind of assumed it was because they obviously have a stable of good people that they go back to,
Okay.
and that's occasionally bringing in. I don't really know how you go around investigating
Okay.
things like that. And also, I'm really, really awful at self promotion. So I would really struggle to go up to someone and say, you should employ me to write your stuff. I'd have no idea what to do and how to do that. My elevator pitches would be 60 seconds of me mumbling and looking at my shoes. So
Okay. So the we're almost done here. And what I'm wondering is that, do you believe that other aspiring Doctor Who or other authors have an easy entry level in the world of publishing today?
do you know what? It's easier now than it ever was to get a book published because
Really?
you can self-publish. The world of self-publishing is there. You go on Amazon and you can self-publish a book through Amazon. So anybody can publish anything these days. So it's to clarify that comment, it's simultaneously harder than ever and easier than ever. So I think to get with one of the big publishers, to get with with an indie publisher, to get an agent is more difficult because probably with the rise of social media, you're getting more and more and more applications. So I think to be an agent or to be the sifter for someone like that must be a horrendous job, because the amount of applications you'll be dealing with it must be terrible to do that. So I think your chances of getting a good pitch through are probably harder than ever on that score. But simultaneously, anybody, you could decide tomorrow, I'm going to write a story and I'm going to publish it on Amazon, and there's nothing to stop you. And who knows, if it picks up an audience, it picks up an audience you made. So yeah, it's both. It's harder than ever and easier than ever, and that's a horrible answer, but there's reasons for it.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's very interesting. My daughters have shown interest in writing books, and I don't know if it's because of the fact that I started interviewing authors, or if they just like books, because we've made it a point to start reading to them when they were very young, and books are a very large part of their lives. So I hope that in the future, if they decide to pursue a career like that, I hope that they may find some success. Which leads into our next question here. To any young people, aspiring writers or dreamers that might have a goal of writing for Doctor Who or anything else that may interest them, with you being obviously successful, and I do consider you to be, with your published works, anybody can get online and they can verify that. I was wondering, what is the best piece of advice that you can give?
To paraphrase Anthony Ainley, don't listen to too much advice.
Okay.
Or, like I said before, write for yourself first. Don't write what you think somebody wants you to write. Write for yourself. Write from your heart.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah, look, if your work gets picked up, you're going to have an editor tear it to pieces, and as because I've just been doing that.
Because most editors are evil, right?
Indeed. Yes, again, Paul McGann, I'm one of the nice ones. No, an editor will take it apart. An agent will take it apart. An editor will take it apart, and the publisher will you'll end up writing what they want to release.
And they're definitely going to change the title, right?
Yeah, of course they are. They're going to change everything, but you can make sure enough of your heart is in there. Then you'll be happy. So I'd always say write for yourself first, and stay the hell off the internet forums, because it's full of very, very angry people, possibly who have never been published themselves and are incredibly bitter about it, who get very, very upset about things like head swapping, which I think, honestly, the amount of forum threads I read about head swapping, when characters' points of view change in one scene. People, it's supposed to be one of those literary no-nos. You must never head swap in a scene. It's bollocks. Yeah, I do it all the time.
Could you elaborate on that a bit more? I've never heard the term head swapping in relation to literature.
It's from when you start a scene or a chapter from one character's POV, and then you change. You suddenly swap, and you're inside a different character's head, looking out. So if I can just perspective, really. So,
and why would you not want to do that? To avoid confusion?
Because apparently it's confusing for the reader. I disagree. I mean, it's not something I do a lot of, but I have done it. And I think there's an awful lot of very, very successful authors out there who do it regularly. But it's one of those things that gets an awful lot of mileage and attention on message boards. So I just say, stay the hell away from them. Write for yourself.
I would think that if it's properly explained, it shouldn't be confusing if the person's into the story.
No, exactly. It's not. Yeah. It's one of, and it's full of things. I mean, I use that as a bit of a fatuous example, but it's an example of things that people will insist online. You must never do this when you're writing, and it's crap. If it feels natural to you and it feels natural for your story, then do whatever the hell you want to do. If it makes no sense, if it's a problem, that will get picked up. When you read, or even when you redraft it yourself, but definitely by the time it gets to the evil empire of editors, they'll certainly pick it up and tell you off for it.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's not the answer I expected to hear, but I guess this is the reason that you do interviews, because you will learn. I guess for anybody else that wants to do some interviews that might be watching this, I guess I would have to warn you. Don't think that you're going to know what the answers are from the person that you're interviewing, because you will be surprised. Okay, so I think we're going to wrap it up. It looks like we're going on just under 2 hours here, and I think I had told you this was estimated to be 30 minutes to an hour. So I apologize for running over. I just now looked at the time here. So I thank you kindly. It looks like we are out of questions. Well, there's one more. I want to urge people to thank Mr. Silvester for his time, because he could have been writing and doing something that makes money instead of visiting with me and answering questions, which will never make either one of us money. But it was fun. And I would urge people, even if you've only listened to 10 or 15 minutes of this interview, go and order Temporal Logbook 3 from Pencil Tip Publishing up there in Canada. And Americans, it's easy. They have their website now linked to a service called Lulu, or service, website, whatever that is. It's in US dollars. The shipping is super cheap. It's easy to use. So I would highly encourage people to please go order Temporal Logbook 3, Changed Lives, 14 Doctor Who stories. And you're going to find something you're going to love. And it's supporting a good charity, which from what I have heard of it that James has shared, I agree with it. Is there how do you feel about the current state of Doctor Who? We're in a weird place where it looks like David Tennant is back and he's being called the 14th Doctor, which I'm not buying. I believe he's still the 10th Doctor. And then we've got Russell T Davies back, which the fans have coined RTD2. And then, of course, we've got the Ncuti Gatwa taking over from Jodie Whittaker, which can be nothing but positive because he's got a huge fan base on his own.
Oh, so, he does, and he's so good. He's one of those casting choices I'd never heard his name mentioned with it. You wouldn't have thought he was in the running, but he is going to be so good. I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not going to try and come up with too many theories because RTD likes to shoot your theories down all the time.
He's full of surprises.
You'll think you know what's happening, and then you really won't. Other than to say that whatever David's last line is in these specials is going to be some variant of either I don't want to go or we were talking about it again. I think Rob Valentine was in on the Twitter chat, and we were trying to say what's his last line going to be. It's going to be I don't want to go. I think. You heard it here first. I think it's going to be a case of he has made peace at last with moving on, and he will be saying it's something like I can go now, or I'm ready to go now, or something like that. So I'm going to put that one down. Okay. That's how I'd write it. But then
that would make sense.
no one will commission me, so it's fine.
All right. Okay. Well, James, thank you very much for your time. And I guess it is probably a good time to wrap it up here. I just realized that my leg has gone numb. I think my foot is asleep, so it's time to get up and start moving around. Thank you for your time. I wish you the best of luck in the future. Hopefully this will get a little bit of attention. Isn't that what social media is for? So did I miss anything? Is there anything you want to add, or was there something that I did not ask that you want to answer?
Oh, no, not at all. It's been lovely. Okay. All I really want to say is, listen, I'm very much a pimple on the arse of Doctor Who. So to be invited onto something like this is hugely appreciated.
No. That's Timescales is not famous, and this is not a professional production. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares. The reason I go by the name Grego is, as I told you, that was my radio handle. And the first time I did an interview, I introduced myself as Grego, and then I got to thinking back later, why did I call myself Grego? Isn't that what you do on an internet interview? Hell, I don't know. But it's been fun interviewing people, and having someone like you give the time is very much appreciated. And I know that people are going to find some stories in Temporal Logbook 3 that they're going to love. I mean, from what I have seen here, you have knocked the ball out of the park, and you it looks like you gave up a year of your life to charity. I mean, my God, man, that is noteworthy. It's very respectable, is what it is.
Oh, thank you very much. That's really kind of you. But yeah, that's for all of the authors, everybody involved with that. I'm so grateful to all of them for getting on board with it. So lovely. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you, James. It was really nice to meet you, and I will see you around on the wires.
You will, sir. Take care.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.